way we think about the evolution of personality is that the first thing we have to discover is that these selves exist inside of us. They're very real. They're very autonomous. The problem is...
As if they were spirits or energies of their own.
If we lived in the Middle Ages, we would have language that's much more accurate. In the Middle Ages, they talked about spirit possession. Literally, when these subpersonalities take over, we are in a spirit possession. But we're too sophisticated in these days to talk about it. The thesis of our work is essentially very simple. We have to become aware of all the selves, and we have to learn to embrace all the selves. That doesn't mean becoming them. It means embracing them. So if, for example, I am identified with being a nice guy, he's sitting over here next to me, let's say, and that's my prevailing way of operating in life. I'm a nice guy, I like people, I want to please you, I want the audience to enjoy what I'm saying, I don't want you to be unhappy with me, okay? Over here is a very different person. Over here is somebody who says, I don't care what people think. If they like you, they like you. If they don't, they don't. Jeff likes you, he likes you. What's the difference? Just be yourself. Say it like it is. This guy says, hey, wait a minute. If I say everything like it is and I share every reaction, you know, I can end up with all enemies. Who needs that? This guy says, if you don't say it like it is and you don't express yourself, you end up with a heart attack. See, these characters are at war in us. It's like a car that's being driven by 20 different people. The primary selves are always fighting to be in charge of who drives the car. So if being a nice guy is primary, that part of you always wants to be in charge. It's afraid of your being a not nice guy. Mm-hmm. So embracing the selves means that you have to find out what are your primary selves. See, if you're raised as a nice guy, how do you know that? How do you know that that's a primary self? How do you know that you're disowning your not nice guy? Well, there's a very simple way to find out. Who can't you stand? What kind of people push your buttons? What kind of people annoy you, irritate you? What kind of people do you judge? There you have the direct picture of your own disowned selves. I mean, it's literally that simple.
And typically, though, a person might say, well, that's not me. I mean, I can't stand that. How could that possibly be me?
That lets you know what a good disowned self it is. See, this is a normal, we're not talking about an abnormal condition. Everyone has selves. Everyone has to be identified with primary selves. There's no way not to. And consciousness means separating from that and learning what's disowned. Let's say a woman, for example, is identified with being a mother. She has 3 children, okay? So she's identified with being a mother. On her other side is a part of her that hates mothering, but she knows nothing about it, okay? The kind of woman that makes her the most uncomfortable is a woman who is very uncaring, a woman who is very cold, like a businesswoman. Whenever she meets a businesswoman, she gets very irritated with that person. Why does she get irritated? Why does she have to judge that kind of person? Because her unloving self is disowned. The part of her that doesn't really enjoy children, that never wanted to have them in the first place, is disowned. Automatically, what happens then is life brings you whatever it is that you disown.
Well, what about the case of a great, like a saint, a Mother Teresa spends her whole life caring for the sick and the dying? Do you think that inside of her there is somebody who hates it, who would really just as soon go and murder people herself? Or?
Well, I don't know what's going on in Mother Teresa, but I would be willing to give fairly heavy odds that she has a considerable system of naughties operating in her. It may be that in this particular incarnation, in this particular life process that she's in, her particular task is to live exactly what she's living. I don't judge that in any way, but I'm no longer naive enough to believe that she doesn't have the other side in her. I have spent 30 years working with people, and I don't have a lot of naivete left about these things. I don't happen to judge that. The fact that I have in me a lot of unconscious selves doesn't disturb me. I just know that they're there, and my task in life is to discover as many of them as I can. The reason that it's very important to discover these opposites, you see, is that only then do I have real choice. For example, if I am writing a book and I only have my rational linear mind available to me, that doesn't give me a lot of choice about what I write or the ideas that come to me. if you make me aware of my intuition and my fantasy life, and I can separate from my mind, okay, now I have a wonderful situation. I have my mind over here, and over here I have my intuition and my fantasy life. I now am able to embrace both of these, okay? Mm-hmm. I embrace both without being identified with either one. That makes life more uncomfortable, you see. If I'm the woman who has the 3 children, I now separate from the mother, and I now have awareness. I now have an ego that is aware. I embrace the part of me that loves children, and I also embrace the part of me that doesn't like children, that never wanted children. Okay? What this results in is sweat. And my personal fantasy about God is that God loves sweat. God loves people who are able to embrace opposites. It makes life more difficult, it makes life more complicated, decisions aren't so easy, but at least they come from a place in us that's born of knowing opposites.
But in this multiplicity of opposites that seems to be the psyche, one might even think of it as larger than that, a zoological garden of all types of inner creatures of the mind, and all of that multiplicity, where is the you? Where is the self?
Well, I can tell you how we think about that, okay? Because everybody has their own way of looking at that. Awareness, when we think about consciousness, we think about it as operating on 3 different levels. Awareness gives me the ability to witness whatever is going on. It's a wonderful gift, as you well know. It means that if I have awareness, I don't have to be identified with anything I'm saying. So even as I communicate these ideas to you, my awareness witnesses. And a part of me doesn't have to be identified with what I'm saying. Mm-hmm. Awareness gives me the gift of not being attached to what I'm saying. It's a wonderful thing. Mm-hmm. But awareness isn't enough, because if you're just aware, then you never experience anything. So the second level of the definition is experience. The experience of all of this multiplicity that you just talked about. We are an unbelievably array of energies. I mean, it's awesome what's inside of us. So the second part of the consciousness is experiencing these different parts. I may not be able to do all of it this time around, but I do the best I can. And that's the journey that all of us are sharing, because every kind of consciousness work at some level is learning and experiencing these different. Mm-hmm. If you're a Jungian, you learn it the symbolic way. If you're a gestalt, you learn it the emotional way. If you're transpersonal, you learn it that way. If you're Reichian, you learn it that way. If you're a body worker, but it's all dealing with all these different energies. Mm-hmm. So awareness and experience. But we need one more thing. Who's going to put it together? Who's going to figure out how to act? Who's going to make choices? The ego. But that's a little complicated, isn't it? Because what we discover in this work is that what we think is our ego is really our primary selves. So if I've been trained as a rational man, and you say to me, "Who are you?" I'm a rational man. Mm-hmm. Until you help me separate from that.
In other words, who you are, as you're describing it to me, is some potential for pure awareness, separate from all of your patterns and behaviors. And
well, I am all 3 of these things. Yeah. I am an aware ego that is taking advantage of this pure awareness and taking advantage of the experience, and I am not identified with any. Mm-hmm. I am an orchestra conductor that is trying to learn how to handle this amazing array of energy around me. I am a gardener who learns how to take care of all these plants and feed the animals that are inside of me and that inhabit my nature.